Welcome back. You may have seen our next guest on your TV screens in House, on the big screen in Harold and Kumar, or working in the White House alongside Barack Obama.
He's lived an incredible life and writes all about it in his new memoir, You Can't Be Serious. We're thrilled to welcome master of all trades, Kal Penn, to the show. Welcome, Kal.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And what a nice introduction. I appreciate it.
Now, this memoir could make for multiple life stories. You're an actor, you've worked for President Obama, and now you're an author. My first question is there anything you can't do?
I am awful at math, which I talk about, I think, in chapter 2, because as the son of immigrants who came to the United States because of an engineering degree, it's like totally unfathomable that I can't do basic math. It's awful. But look, I appreciate that question because I wanted to write a book that made the reader or the audiobook listener feel like we were just having a beer together and going on this crazy journey from making movies to working in politics to family and love stories. And so I'm just excited that the book's finally out there.
Well, we are excited too. Let's go back in time because you've had this interest in acting since you were a kid. And we actually have a photo here of your high school acting debut as the Tin Man. Amazing. But you've shared that you faced a lot of racism in your early career as an actor. For example, when you walked into an audition, let's talk about audition, what typically typecasting looks like.
Yeah, I write about this because of how much things have thankfully changed in the entertainment industry. I remember some of my first auditions. There's a story I tell about that show Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which you might remember from back in the day. I remember getting a part on that show and being told by the director that they needed an Indian accent. And, an accent itself is obviously not stereotypical, but generally it signifies a reductionism and sort of a focus on character traits that aren't independent, that don't make somebody tick. And I remember asking the director, when I booked the I said, is there any way that maybe I could do it without the accent? And he said, no, it's funny. The accent's funny. And I said, well, I never grew up seeing people who looked like me who weren't cartoon characters or weren't doing something terribly stereotypical. So I just thought maybe this would be a cool opportunity. He said, no, the accent's funny. You're doing it. And then the third time around, I kind of thought, I keep hearing that it's that it's because of ignorance that people say things like this. So let me educate him. And I said, I have little cousins. They're 9 and 10 years old. They love your show. I just thought it would be so cool if I could ground this character in the comedy in something that had nothing to do with his race or ethnicity. And I thought they might appreciate it too. And he looked at me and he said, well, your little cousins should feel lucky that you're allowed to be on TV to begin with. And so should you. And he walked off. And the reason that I write about this in the book is not to sort of have a chip on my shoulder about the way things might have been 20 years ago, but because those were pretty regular occurrences back in those days. And I'm so glad that the industry that I love and the job that I love acting, I love making people laugh. It's evolved quite a bit, not just for performers like myself, but for audiences who get the chance to experience all sorts of stories nowadays.
That lesson that you had for that casting director is exactly why I loved you so much in Harold and Kumar. I've been a fan forever, okay? Now, people might be surprised to hear how common it was to see white actors in brownface at the beginning of your career, because we're talking about the early 2000s here, which is not that long ago. You even had to compete for roles with people wearing brownface for major Hollywood productions. Can you tell us what that was like for you?
I mean, it wasn't great. I'm glad that as late as, and I can't remember the chapter number, but I remember, oftentimes we think of things like brownface in the context of, that must have happened so long ago. But if I remember correctly, it happened around the time that Bye 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 came out, that song, which is still part of my karaoke playlist. So, it just shows you that it hasn't really been that long. But look, it was, I think aside from just the idea that it is, of course, rooted in something pretty awful, it also shows you the barriers to entry that a lot of performers of color also continue to face. Every actor, to be completely fair, will always face this conversation of, well, he or she was too tall, too short, too fat, or too skinny for the particular role. But a lot of times for performers of color, that barrier to entry is that you're just too ethnic. You don't have the luxury of being too tall, too short, too fat, or too skinny. And I write about those because some of my, I remember I did this movie called Van Wilder, which very complex, long story that I know we don't have time for. But that final round at that audition, it was me and a white guy in brownface. And I hadn't yet decided whether I wanted to take that part for a number of reasons. Turned out to be an incredible experience. Ryan Reynolds is fantastic and was nothing but supportive. But because of all those nuances that I talk about in that particular chapter, you kind of get a sense of the conversations that a lot of performers have early in their career. And I have to say, since you mentioned Harold and Kumar, we shot that first movie in Toronto. Toronto showed us so much love, and it was such a historic, special moment for us because it was the first time that a studio had two Asian American men as the leads in a buddy comedy. So a lot of special memories related to that one.
And it seems like your acting career really took off, and you landed a permanent gig on House as Dr. Lawrence Kuttner. Right when you got the stability that every actor dreams about, you left to work for Obama. So how many people at the time were telling you that this was a bad idea?
Well, one of the reasons that the book is called "You Can't Be Serious" is exactly that question. the idea that I wanted to be an actor, as the son of immigrants in the 1990s, people sort of said, "You're crazy. That's going to be very difficult, or maybe it's not even something you can do." By the same token, when I said I wanted to take a sabbatical from acting, which is my first love, and serve my country, it was a similar thing. You can't be serious. You're crazy. And to be fair, there are lots of other people who do this sort of a thing. The Obama administration was full of thousands of people who had taken a leave of absence from whatever they were working on before. I have plenty of friends who work in Canadian politics and public service, and that story is very similar. So it's kind of a nice tribute to know that you're in the company of people who are trying to do their part, whatever that looks like. But to your point, yeah, it was it was a big jump, and it was a jump that I very much appreciated. And it's one of the reasons that, that I put these stories together is for the 25-year-old version of me who maybe never had a guide on, well, what's it like navigating Hollywood and politics? And we view the two as these monoliths that are just unchangeable. And the truth is they are changeable, and they are accessible to people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
And after working for Obama during his election campaign, you were hired as an associate director and liaison to the president, where you had to make tough decisions on behalf of the White House. Now, acting can be stressful, I'm sure, but how do you compare that to the stress of making decisions for an entire country?
Yeah, well, look, I was a junior mid-level staffer, and so the types of choices and decisions that I and my coworkers got to make was thankfully not vitriolic or sexy enough to ever make it onto the news. But that didn't mean that they weren't really meaningful conversations. I had the chance to work on things like student loan reform and the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, our big healthcare bill, the Affordable Care Act, and the outreach office actually got to meet with what we call real people, real humans who are affected by all of these proposed pieces of legislation and executive rulemaking. And it really opened my eyes to what's possible when people actually get together and try to make their voices heard. I know that sounds really hokey, but especially when you look at how divided things are these days, it was a pleasant experience. It was a nice one. It was also, I made plenty of mistakes, which I talk about very openly, finally, in the White House chapters. It wasn't all putting on a suit like this and being serious. We also knew how to have fun every now and then.
Kal, in this book, you really go everywhere. You came out, you revealed that you've been in a relationship with your partner, Josh, for 11 years. And the two of you recently also got engaged. Huge congratulations. I have to ask you, what's it been like to share your love with the world? And also, is it true that Cardi B might officiate your wedding?
I'll answer the second one first. I hear it's true, so I'm very excited about this. But yeah, look, I'm the chapter 18 where I talk about how my partner Josh and I met under the unlikeliest of circumstances. We're two totally different people. I tend to be, obviously, I'm an actor, so there's nothing more attention-seeking than an actor, right? Like, look at me, look at my parts. And he's a really quiet guy, so it's sort of an opposites attract scenario, which I know a lot of people can relate to. Lots of couples have that yin and yang. I'm excited to share that story. I'm also excited to share, my parents are also, they also sort of shun the limelight quite a bit. And I wanted to write about, especially my dad's upbringing. He grew up in a tenement apartment in Mumbai, and my grandparents marched with Gandhi. They had no running water or toilets when they were growing up. There was a bathroom that you had to walk all the way down to the end of the hallway. It was this sort of communal space. And I wanted to share those stories about my parents' upbringing, about how I met and fell in love with Josh, because they're so integral to who I am and where I come from. And I'm excited to share those because, again, like I said, the 25-year-old version of me, whether it was navigating entertainment, whether it was how to place the grandparent story, I'll give you an aside actually about what I mean by this. So I remember being 8 years old, and my grandparents were telling me stories about what it was like to march with Gandhi in the Indian independence movement. And at 8 years old, all I was thinking was, there grandma goes again. Another story about Gandhi, right? You don't realize till you get older how much of an impact these stories have on you. And I wanted
Kal,
to share
you are an incredible storyteller. The book is incredible. Thank you for being here. For everyone watching,
so
it's called You Can't Be Serious. You can find it everywhere right now. We'll be right back.